Welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is helping entrepreneurs to build enduring great businesses. I'm Brad Giles, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. As always, looking forward to the show, and we always find these interesting topics to discuss that we think could be real valuable for people. So yeah, great week with clients last week. Had some downtime on the weekend that I really needed. It was really intense last week, and yeah, life is good. So, what are we talking about today? What's our interesting conversation going to be about?
Well, yeah, you said you had downtime last week, kind of very, very remotely connected to that. We're talking about when entrepreneurs lose their vision and what to do about it. So entrepreneurs, very passionate people, and everyone thinks have a fantastic vision at all times, but sometimes they can lose their vision.
Yes, absolutely, and it can result in them wanting to make some crazy decisions, like wanting to sell their business or get away from their business or get into a new business or all kinds of things. So, and some of those behaviors can end up being great, but I'm going to start with a story of a good friend of mine. He's been a client for probably 15, 17 years, and we're due to catch up again. I haven't seen him for a while. His name is Nigel. He's here in Vancouver, and and he's opening story in my book, so I'm not disclosing anything that's that I shouldn't be. Nigel's an awesome guy, entrepreneur in the oil spill cleanup industry. So they made these cool machines that have these brushes that dip into the water and pull heavy crude oil out of the water when there's oil spills. Really needed equipment. Great business. And Nigel's an awesome guy. But when I first met him, he had enough, and he described it as he went to his business, put his hand on the doorknob, and it felt like he was getting electrocuted. And he didn't want to go into his own business. Not only did he hate it, he felt like it was destroying him. It was like his kryptonite. And so his solution, for real, his business plan was to get rid of it and go and sell t-shirts on the beach in Tahiti. And he wasn't joking. He wasn't. He was contemplating it. So we managed to work through that and find ways. But really, there was a whole bunch of stuff in his business he hated. He had issues with a president. He had issues with a partner and a whole bunch of other things where it had become, I'm exaggerating a little bit, almost like a toxic cesspool of its own. They were in the cleaning up toxic stuff in the environment, but the environment inside his company was toxic. And he just didn't like it. So, he and I spent some time, and we started going for walks and hikes because that's how he focuses best. And we just started working through the things one at a time and finding a way to make it into a great business that he loved.
Yeah.
And it's been many, many years since, but he was at that giving up point. And it's common because when it's all we know and we've done it for years and it's not working and all it's doing is giving us grief, it's easy to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's a real thing that happens for most entrepreneurs at some point in their growth.
So we can withstand, even the most resilient people can withstand grief, to use your word, to withstand tough situations for a while, a day, a week, a month, a year, multiple years. But everybody eventually just wears out, and they think, you know what, like, what if there was an escape? Like, I had this happen to me about a dozen years ago. I remember we had some pretty tough things happening in the business. From people to strategy to execution to cash, we had a whole range of things that were very, very challenging over a period of time. And I can remember going out to a cafe and looking over at the barista and thinking, that would be the best job in the world. That would be just, imagine that. Here's what you got to do. You got to get the beans. You got to grind the beans. Then you got to pack the beans. Then you got to push the steam and the water through the beans. And then you heat up the milk and you pour that in. And then you do it again. Now, clearly I was not in my right mind at that point, but we look for escape. We look for ways to think, well, is there a way out of this? Like, this is all too hard. And what can I do to get out of this situation? So yeah, I've been there, and it's a tough spot to see. And I've also seen sort of many, many people. There's one person comes to mind right now, and he just said to me, look, I think I want to sell the business. And I'm like, you've been working in this business for 20 years. 20 years. It's taking you 20 years to get the gross profit margin to the point it is, to have the right people on the team, to have the strategy where, like, we've been working so hard. I've been working with him I've known him for the 20 years, but I've been working with him closely for a few years, like 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm like, you finally got the business that you always wanted. Now he's got other pressures in his life, but I'm like, how can you reconnect to your vision? How can you re-engage?
Yeah. So we have both, as we're preparing for the show, I have been in that scenario so many times.
Yeah.
So many. And sometimes there's a strategy to build a business and sell it. That is the strategy. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who build a business and they plan on keeping it going for a long time. They just tap out and said, I just don't want to do this anymore. So what is the key thing to do? And I mean, we could share stories all day. Actually, most clients we've worked with have said that at some point when they're fed up. Just a side note, I remember being with some friends one day, and seeing these guys, a bunch of construction guys in a truck going to work.
Yeah.
And now they're all sitting there drinking their coffee, smoking their cigarettes, having a great conversation. They look like they were having fun.
Yeah.
And less pressure. And they probably have different pressures. But there's times when it's like you want to hit that pressure release valve.
Yeah.
Usually it means you're in the middle of a bunch of growth. And my experience with all of these leaders and myself, I've been to those places as well, is that either you have to grow dramatically or you've got to shrink things down to a more manageable level of stress. So usually you have not always, because every situation can be worked through. Every business, as long as there's a reasonable business model, can be made great. Now, it could be very painful, but there's always, I would say 99% of the time, unless you're like selling typewriters or something that there's no demand for anymore. If there's still reasonable demand, there's always a way to make it better. It's just a lot of tough decisions, and
work.
And as one of my, a story that I heard about a CEO who, when a business is in rough shape, saying, look, they can easily remove us and bring new people in to run this business, and they will see all kinds of opportunities and find a way to make it better. Or we can walk out of the room. We can walk back in like we're the new guys and look at this thing with fresh eyes, and then we can be the ones to make it better. Because when you're in the middle of it, you don't have those fresh eyes. So how do you help people to really diagnose what's going on, and from just wanting to tap out and justify it lots of ways versus getting in there and getting the business back to great again? Because normally the ones that people are talking about selling at that point in time aren't usually great companies, which is, we're about building enduring great companies.
Yeah.
Or they're in a not so great trough.
Yes. So I think, how do you diagnose? Well, the first point is understanding that this reaction to the business, this, let's say, falling out of love with the business or not having a vision and not knowing what to do, and therefore getting to the point where you say, I just want out, I want to sell. I think that first of all, understanding that is a symptom of something else, that this is happening for a reason. So then it's taking a step back and saying, well, what is it that's making me feel this way? What is it? Is it So is it a problem with my team, either my leadership team or the broader team? Is it that I don't have the right people in the right seats? Is it the strategy? Is the strategy
Yeah.
not producing the gross margin that you want? Is it, are you consistently, pardon me, continually, are you continually fighting pricing battles with the competition? And there's no customer loyalty. Is it an execution problem?
Do you not like the work you do anymore? Is it the way you
Yeah.
spend your day? Is it the people that you spend time with?
And what you said there is like your job description as CEO
Yeah,
or whatever it is. Like, what gives you energy in your role? What drains you energy? So then are you
correct.
executing poorly? Is the team executing poorly? And therefore there's no profit coming through. And then finally
It's
cash.
like when you go to the doctor and something doesn't feel right. You go to the doctor
Yeah.
and say you don't feel well. Well, he or she is going to ask you a bunch of questions and trying to narrow down. One second here, I'll be right. Narrow down where the pain is. Just got a cough here.
And this is the pause point where Kevin coughs, and we are almost back. And we're
I
back.
am back. I might have to go away again. But you try and get down. So, for example, I'll give you a story. Another client I work with, awesome guy, built a really successful company. And I'm talking to him one day and he wants to sell. I'm like, okay. And he goes, it's just not fun. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. And we started digging in. His biggest headache was these people and legal problems with people. Now, there's always legal problems with people when you let them go. There can be. But this guy had a lot.
Yeah.
So whenever someone would mess up and they'd have to get let go, he'd have to get involved. Unfortunately, because he was angry and fed up when he got involved, it turned into a lawsuit almost every time. Like he had a track record of people suing him that is much more than normal for wrongful dismissal than I had heard. And he's an awesome guy. Like I love this guy. He's awesome.
Yeah.
So we started digging into it and he told me about his approach. He didn't like dealing with it. He was very, very frustrated and it usually turned into lawsuits. And then he had to deal with the lawsuits. And I said to him, well, why are you dealing with letting the people go and dealing with the legal issues? He goes, well, I'm the owner. I have to. I said, says who?
Yeah.
So, well, I said, how about a world where you don't get involved in those conversations? Probably because you turn them into lawsuits. You probably shouldn't. And if there is a lawsuit, let your HR person handle it or get an HR consultant who's more sophisticated to handle it.
And then just know what is the outcome.
Yeah. So you put somebody into the meeting that's way less aggressive and used to smoothing things over. Well, you get way less lawsuits to start with, which is his new reality. And when there are, you let that same HR person who's super sharp deal with those and they go away a lot easier. And no matter what, you don't have to deal with it. His job love goes up dramatically.
Yeah.
Because the part that he was getting sucked into, which he may have made worse or not, don't know. But no matter what, he doesn't have to deal with it. And, he's not getting drained, but he didn't even know he could have somebody else handle that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an important point that you make there because, Mel Brooks, the filmmaker. Yeah. In one of his films, there's this particular scene and it's a comedy, right? But he says, it's good to be king. Okay. You may remember that phrase.
Yes.
It's good to be king, right? You get a lot of benefits, but that's what I say to CEOs that I work with. Like, it's good to be king. And by that, what I mean is you get to build your job the way that you want. There are obviously some responsibilities you can't abdicate, but if you don't like the
Not
legal,
many.
don't do it. Palm that off. Create the job that you want to do that gives you the most energy.
Yes.
And
But Brad, that's logical. When they're in the middle of it, they forget that or they don't see how.
Yeah.
The amount of ways I and you have changed the way CEOs or owners spend their time is dramatic. And in many cases, it blows their mind. Oh, I could do that. I don't have to because you get stuck in it. So it's like when things get like that, you need someone who's an external external to the situation, or maybe one your team, to help you diagnose the real issue and get to the root of looking for a solution, because it's
I don't
all
know. I don't know. I'm
solvable.
sorry. I've got to stop you there. I don't think that one of your team can do it because they're too deep in the issue.
Some people, I've seen a few executives that are great partners, to thought partners to the CEO, but generally there's a potential conflict of interest there. I agree. Generally, it's better to be somebody else. And again, it goes back, we've talked before about pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Like, I was on a call today with a CEO and we're talking about an acquisition. And I'm asking a few questions about the owner of the company they're acquiring. And like, I can almost predict what it looks like inside the business. And because they said a couple things about why the person was selling, which tells me about potential liabilities, because the guy had built a fairly substantial business and he wants out because he's stressed out and he's had enough. Well, if you've got a substantial business and that's happening and it's profitable, it's not very profitable. Yeah. That tells me and it's above industry average profitability. There's a real good chance that they're running very, very lean and he doesn't have an incredibly strong team. That's my hypothesis. I know it's fairly good chance it's right, not guaranteed. But because it's like, well, why else would you sell? The seller's young, and it's a great business, but it's killing them. And and it's, so whatever it is, that might not be it. It probably is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, but that can be resolved. Having a weak team is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Absolute nightmare.
Or maybe it's a combination. I remember I was working with a client and they struggled to empower other people in their team. Number one.
Yep.
Okay. So that meant that all of the responsibility fell onto them, and therefore all of the stress fell onto them. And they looked to the rest of the team and thought, why don't we hire? Why haven't we got good people? Okay. And, I'm not to judge whether they were or weren't good people, but the problem is that they weren't empowering the people to give them responsibility. But then number two is that they were highly reluctant to increase their prices. Now, I spent a whole day with them analyzing their pricing versus the competition, which was publicly available, and went into great detail why they needed to if they increased by 10%, they would still be massively cheaper compared to the competition for essentially the same product. So it was their beliefs, to your point earlier, it was their beliefs that got them into the situation where they began to think, I just want out. I don't want to do this. And it's like,
right. They were painted into a corner that actually didn't exist.
It existed in their own mind, but it wasn't real.
But it wasn't real.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what happens. I like your thing. It's a combination, because also, as you talked about, sometimes the people that the team reporting to the CEO might not be strong enough, but it may not be because of capability. The CEO may not be empowering them enough or challenging them enough, which happens in some case. Some CEOs do too much of their team's work. So that was an interesting point you said there, Brad. And that is a big piece. Yeah.
Which is ironic when you take two steps and you just analyze that, you say, so you don't like the business because you're not getting other people to take responsibility. And when you actually say it logically, it's a little bit confusing. But
you don't like the business because you've got good people, but you're not giving them much to do. And you're not pushing enough down. It's interesting. And that's why we are in love with tools and things. So another CEO was on the phone with last week. And again, smart guy, one of these guys who had a business. It didn't go so well. He's rebuilt a second business. It's going great. Yeah. And we were talking about some of the people issues he's having. And we know people issues are everywhere. And somebody said the other day, I was talking to him, what I realized is I'm not building a business. I'm building a bunch of people and some systems to support it. So as we were talking, he's talking about some people problems he has. And I'm like, well, what's your performance evaluation? Do you have anything to give feedback on performance? Well, we stopped doing it. I go, why? Because it took too long. I'm like, okay, but why? Well, so-and-so who's my right hand, he's got like 14 direct reports. Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, and what about this person you're telling me that's going rogue? Who's their manager? Well, they don't really have a manager. Okay. So don't have a system for giving feedback. And there's some people who actually don't have a manager. And, it was interesting because this, in a business that should be running 80% productivity or utilization, there was a guy that was running notably less. It's like, well, has his manager talked to him? Well, he doesn't really have a manager. So there's these other things. And as I went through and I, jumped on a call with the CEO and his team to explain some stuff, and they're like, oh, great ideas. Because they didn't know, like they were just trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And that's what we forget is, and this is, I am very, very grateful for the experiences I've had, well over 25 years now of doing this. And I know you are too, Brad. Like what I've been able to learn in seeing inside the operations of all these good companies going to great. There's been a lot of learning. And the pattern recognition we have is immense because you can look at a situation, ask a few questions, just like a specialist doctor. You got a pretty good sense of what the problem potentially could be. And then you can, do some assessment.
Well, when you and I were preparing for this call, we started playing with the subjects, and then we got onto this idea that leaders burn out, that they've had enough and they want to sell, and instantly that pattern recognition kicked in. And I'm thinking of like a dozen or 20 different examples where I've been through that, and you're probably the same. So it is the pattern recognition.
Easily 20 that I know.
Yeah. So the pattern recognition is so important.
Well, but not only on diagnosing the issue, Brad, but is on also looking at options or solutions and the likelihood that they will work.
Yes.
So for example, I have somebody else I know that hated their business and had a very weak team. And this is not a client, but we were chatting about it. And they tried to grind it out with a mediocre team. They're trying to build a great business with a bunch of B players.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
You're probably still going to hate your business because if you're a racehorse, you don't want to be running around with a bunch of ponies. You want to be with other racehorses. So it's like, acknowledging the brutal facts. You can see the core issue. You still then need to do something about it. Yeah. Trying to do better work with a mediocre team, it's not going to work no matter what you do.
Yeah. It's not, and they would be perhaps justifying it in their own mind. We can't pay that amount to get caliber of person. We don't need to. It's an absolute waste. All we need is someone to fill this role in a leadership team, and that's what I'm going to pay. And that justification, I'm not saying we should pay the sky's the limit, but that justification can do irreparable harm to not only the business, but the leader.
It's not even true. If you're paying, a person in a role, if it's a leader in your business and they're getting a 6-figure income, there's a lot of great people that will do that job for that 6-figure income.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the people piece, I mean, we can go on and on. And how.
So let's take one step back. So we've said we've got to first step is you've got to diagnose the pain, like the core pain.
Just like the doctor would do.
Yeah. What is causing you to feel this? Something, people, strategy, execution, cash. And oftentimes, if it's not the people, I would say it's the business model. The business model may need to change, which is a multi-year project to fully execute that perhaps. Although you can figure it out and start it pretty quickly, to fully roll it through, it could take a while, but that's okay. If you've got a light at the end of the tunnel, it's a good thing. And then once you understand the core issue, then you're saying, well, what is it the future that you envision? What is if you go 3 years out or
Well,
whatever it
even
might
before you
be?
do that though, Brad, you probably want to get some help because you're going
Yeah.
to need some belief. Like that's where a mentor, like a been there, done that person who's walked a similar path, because seeing the problem and going to belief, you generally have lost the belief along the way, and you need someone. Like I know even in my work sometimes it's people rent our belief and our ability to get out of stuff. Seriously.
Yeah.
'Cause I won't work with someone unless I believe in them. But
Yeah.
it's that extra belief is a piece of it. So I think you normally need an outside help, intervention, support, whatever it is. There's a quote, and I think it might be falsely attributed to Einstein, but it's that and it may not. I think it's somebody. It might be somebody else, but it's the problem will not or cannot be solved by the same mind that created it. Problem cannot be solved by the same mind that created it. And
Yeah.
often we're in the middle of our own problems,
Yeah.
and we're the cause or a part of the cause. So we often need something else, and ideally someone with a boatload of experience so they can help pattern recognize their way through it.
Yeah. To your earlier point, yeah. I don't work with people unless I've got a strong belief in them. That's why it takes a long time for me to engage with people. But you know, um, it's almost like I'm carrying the person through the times when they lose their belief in the future for the
You're
business and
you're locking
themselves.
arms and
Yep.
marching together.
Yeah, you've got
Right.
to. You've got to. Which is if you have a coach or advisor who's only focusing on the tool and not focusing on that belief on the future, like you've got to be conscious and wary of that. You've got to have someone who believes in the business. So once we've got that, then identifying that future. So if we evolve the
Yes.
business model, if we evolve our leadership team, if we uh, improve the areas that have been identified that are causing you to feel this way, so go a year or 2 or 3 out and kind of envision the ideal future. I don't want to kind of get too much into that, but just say, what does the
Yeah.
perfect role for you look like that will give you massive amounts of energy because it's producing the right gross margin, or you're working with the right people, or whatever that is, so that you can get a really clear idea of where you're trying to
Yeah.
get to.
So you have something to focus on beside today's pain. There's
Yeah.
a reason to push through. There's a place where you get to where it's good. It's the basics of goal setting, but it's something you can get excited about that's beyond this that will help you to push through. It's the reason why you're doing it, or it's not so much why as purpose, but it's where you're going to get to because you do this.
Yes. Yeah. And it gives it makes you able to tolerate today's pain, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. It makes you able to handle it, because all we've got to do now is execute that plan and life will be better.
Yeah, and it's which kind of would go into the next point is reminding yourself as you're on a growth path and it is supposed to hurt.
What does
Like
that mean?
if we like if let's say that I was able to fly down to Australia again, which I really hope to again one day. I've been there a couple times and love it there. When we can meet on your home turf or here, when we can meet on our home turf, and if you were to take me out in the outback and we were to go on an adventure on a bumpy road, and the fact that it's a bumpy road and all of this stuff, it's a part of the experience. It's supposed to be a bumpy road, so I'm going to be accepting of it.
Yeah.
And same thing if I took you here in the mountains and we're on a bumpy road, I'm going to be accepted because it's supposed to be. But in our work sometimes, and what we're doing, we expect it to be smooth sailing. It ain't never smooth sailing. It's supposed to be bumpy. And the reminder is, and if you have a growth mindset, you'll know that these are all catalysts for your growth. You always come out better. You always come out stronger if you choose to take those things on and learn from them.
Yeah, that's growth is tension. So there will be bumpy roads. There will be things that happen. There'll be things along the way. And it, you know, here's the thing. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And
Yep.
it's a great resource, number one. But number two, it's the thing about growing a company is you never know what is the next ceiling that you're going to hit until you've hit it. And you don't know
Yes.
what's beyond that, and you don't know how to get through it. It's a fascinating journey to look at. So if you get to this point as a leader, as an entrepreneur, it's only probably because you've never done it before and you didn't know
Correct.
that you needed to evolve the gross margin through the business model, or you needed to, let's say, improve the quality of your leadership team, or any of the things that we're saying. So because you've never been there before, therefore, you're not going to know what needs to be done. Now, certainly we've spoken already about the benefit of coaches and advisors and mentors, and that's great, but you're here for that reason, and that's okay.
Yeah. And for example, is you don't know what a really good CFO isn't
Yeah.
until you don't have one. Like you don't know that having proper reporting on your cash flow is important until you have to go raise $3 or $4 million one weekend
Yeah.
because you find out there's no money to pay the bills next week. Like, you don't know about internet security until you get hacked. You don't know about employment agreements until one blows up in your face. Like there's all these things, and that's all part of the learning. That's why even on this, I have this rule of thumb is that, if to be a successful CEO, you generally need to burn the equivalent of 2 years of EBITDA.
Yeah.
So if your business is, if you're taking over $100 million business, it makes 15 million a year of EBITDA for simple numbers or profit. You probably got to burn 30 million bucks to get good,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So if you're taking over $1 billion business, that could be, 20 to 30 million dollars, 200 to 300 million dollars if you step in without enough experience in that space. You make a lot of it's expensive. It's really, really expensive. So whether those numbers are perfect or not, the key is you're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's going to hurt both you and the business, but that's just part of it.
Last week, I was sitting, I'm going to say within the last 2 weeks, I was sitting with a CEO, and we went through this conversation, and I only just remembered this story then. And I was saying to the CEO, look, what is it that's making you want to sell the business? What is it? Like you're saying, you're setting it up to sell, and I get it. Like, first of all, I'm thinking, what are you going to do afterwards? Like,
Yeah.
because you
What are
go
you
on
going to do when you
gardening.
get bored as soon as you're out? Yes.
Yeah, you're going to build another business, and then it's going to take you 20 years to get back to this point. But that's besides the point. So we just grinded and grinded through all of these things over a few hours. And then I said, look, here's what I want to do. I want you to write the things at the moment that gives you energy and the things that drain your energy every day. Okay. And so at that point, I needed to step out to go to the bathroom, and I came back, and there was nothing when I left. And there was this long list on each side. And I was like, whoa, you've been busy. And as I looked at it, as soon as I saw it, I said, there's a role missing here. You're doing someone else's job. And it was that of a health and safety, environmental and quality assurance person, HSEQ. I said, this business has grown that you're doing it, and because you're doing a poor job of it, because you also got to run the company, you're not able to actually do it great and hold all of the other people accountable to it. And so really quickly we identified that this is it had such magnitude to figure that out. And by the end of the meeting, this CEO was like, I can't believe that we've just identified that this is the cause of all of my pain, that I just have this role that we've never employed for before. So I'm not saying it's always as simple as that. And this person may still sell their business. But the point is, it's an emotional reaction that's driving a lot of people. And there's something that's driving that.
Yeah. And spending the time to dig into it, to truly understand it. It's like if you go to the doctor and they can't figure out what's right, they run some tests and send you to a specialist.
Yeah.
Where they do a deeper level, but the answer is always there and it's almost always fixable if you're willing. And that's the root of all of this stuff. And normally, and that's why our final point on our action list here is get a coach, get a mentor, get a better board member, sometimes even get a therapist. Sometimes it's all of the above. And that's the fortunate thing about being, the leader of a business or an entrepreneur, is that you can afford these things. Even many executives can afford these things because they get an above average income. So they can afford above average support or resources. And I'll kind of leave you with, a final thought from one of my clients. One of his mantras is billionaire habits. So he's got a business that's doing about $500 million of revenue a year. We have a BHAG to get to 10 billion.
Right.
That's his goal. And we have a mantra, which is billionaire habits. And, he was struggling with something the other day. We're trying to figure something out. Something wasn't working. I said, great. So what's the billionaire habit here? Boom, shifts his mind out of his current reality. We get a solution. We started talking about it. And it was a very interesting one. Kind of had to help him with a bit because he was stuck on it. Yeah. He was thinking like a millionaire, not like a billionaire. Yeah. So we strapped billionaire thinking on, and for him, it's meaningful. And we had a perfect solution very quickly. But he needed to get out of his regular mindset. He did not grow up a billionaire. He did not grow up in that kind of mindset. So we had to open up his mind a little bit. And it was a great mantra of thinking bigger and doing it right.
That's
so
awesome.
I think we've covered it off. So if we really kind of summarize this, Brad, diagnose the core pain. Is it people, strategy, execution, cash, or you? Find someone to help you fix that core pain who truly understands it. A specialist, ideally, could be consultant, could be all kinds of different things. What can help you figure it out? And then, start to build the vision of what it looks like beyond this and what you're trying to create again, so you can get excited. Remembering you're on a growth curve and it's supposed to hurt, and just make sure that you learn and keep growing. And then, even for yourself, coach, therapist, mentor, who can help you through, who can lock arms with you through this. And if you still choose to sell, it's great. By the way, we know some great people that can help you sell your business. Yeah. If you truly want to, and that's your strategy, that is not the common strategy for people we work with. But if you want to, I know some great people that can do it. So thanks for listening today. This has been the Growth Whisperers with Brad Giles and Kevin Lawrence. Happy to share our thoughts. If you have any questions or suggestions for shows, please let us know. Brad, you can get him at evolutionpartners.com.au, and myself, Kevin, at lawrenceandco.com. Have an awesome week. And remember, there's always a way to fix almost every situation if you get the right help and the right mindset. So you don't have to be like Nigel and go sell t-shirts on the beach, although it's always an option. Have a great one.